In the tradition of the church, she has often had times of public prayer meetings. The monastic tradition held to praying 8 times a day. This was based on a psalm where David says, I pray to you 7 times a day. I don't know why they added the 8th one. This was called the Liturgy of the Hours. During the Reformation, especially in England, these were condensed to 2 times of prayer a day, Vespers and Matins. Sometimes Vespers is called evensong. So evening prayer and morning prayer. The Anglican, Lutheran, and sometimes Presbyterian and Methodist tradition continues to practice Matins and Vespers. I would often lead morning prayer, Matins, at a Presbyterian seminary. If you're unfamiliar, what Matins and Vespers consists of is when Christians come to a chapel or to a church, they recite creeds, they sing the Psalter, they hear the word read, there's a small homily usually given, and then there's prayers that are said, which are largely scripted. Sometimes there's extemporaneous ones permitted. So it's basically like a mini church service. It takes about 30 minutes minus communion. Since we are culture builders here, I would affirm my own desire to carry on this tradition, perhaps having something like Matins and Vespers on Mondays and Wednesdays, something like that. It is a beautiful and edifying tradition of the church to gather together publicly to pray, sing psalms together, and hear the word read. However, I want to affirm and carry on another tradition. In the Evangelical tradition, we have a practice which is also quite monastic, and we call it quiet time devotions. I don't particularly like the nomenclature. We can work on that later. But the point is that this is a venerable tradition that we ought to maintain. Traditionally minded Christians generally love Matins and Vespers and corporate worship and corporate prayer, but I think that they run the risk of undervaluing personal, private prayer. The young, tiresome, and traditionalists are such reactionaries to me, Jesus, and my Bible and American individualism that they simply pull the classic baby in bathwater routine. They overcorrect and they glory in the other ditch. So let me say, we need more me, Jesus, and my Bible, and we need more American individualism. Why do I say this? Because Jesus regularly practiced these things himself. Let me explain. Personal, private prayer while you're alone is something encouraged by Jesus, both by his words and his life. And this wasn't to the exclusion of corporate prayer. Jesus attended synagogue. But Jesus would often pray privately. Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Mark 14:23, and after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Mark 1:35, now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. And Jesus explicitly teaches us in Matthew 6:6, but when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And so we ought to maintain and regularly practice this venerable evangelical tradition. The Lord meets us in corporate prayer. He meets us in personal prayer. This reminds us of our need to confess.